Oh shit, this is recorded. Oh man, yeah, okay. I can't be liable for anything that happens beyond this point.
Well, we can edit if needed.
And
Hey,
we're not in America, Jason.
Yeah, we need to edit though.
No, again, thanks for inviting me, guys. This is great. Yeah, cheers.
Yeah, we would like to welcome Jason from all the way from McLeods. It's up north for the people who think it's down south, but anyway, thanks, Jason. Really appreciate you giving us some time, and it'll be a pleasure to hear your insights and your wisdom and your knowledge you've got to share. Thanks very much.
Cheers. No, thanks, guys.
Yeah.
So, well, how do you, I'm not sure the formalities of how this works.
Well, if you just want to,
yeah.
How did you end up in New Zealand?
Wow. That's interesting because for some reason throughout my life, I've always been fascinated with New Zealand. I grew up in Vermont, which is the upper northeast of the United States. And I'm not exactly sure why, but it was always some place that had been in my mind probably since I was probably just out of high school. And the first opportunity arose in 2008 for me to be able to travel to New Zealand. So at that point, I set out a huge mission, and my partner Monica and I saved up enough money so basically we could do the classic tiki tour around New Zealand. And we did. We grabbed the caravan, did the South Island tour, went through the Upper North Island as well. It was just an amazing experience, as you guys all know, because you all live here. And when I got home, we just looked at each other and we're like, fuck, if there's one other place in the world that we could be, where would it be? And it was New Zealand, without a doubt. So at that point, an expression of interest, went through all the paperwork through the government, and we were able to get permanent residence prior to arrival, just based on my experience as being a chef, and there was a long-term skill shortage. So we took that opportunity and looked at some jobs that might be up there, and we landed in Nelson in December of 2009. And yeah, as I just mentioned before, just out of hobby, grabbed a Cooper's kit just for something to, something to do on the weekends while I was basically working restaurants during the week. And it made an absolutely fucking terrible Munich lager out of the original kit that came with it. As we all do when you sit ambient and you chuck it behind the couch and see what happens. Had a little closet that I did ambient storage for the longest time, just trying to do bottle conditioning. And, one thing leads to another, as we all do, and you start to figure out what works, what doesn't work. Did a couple homebrew competitions, and then actually surprisingly got some relatively good feedback. And the beers were actually starting to taste a little bit better.
This is still from kits.
Yeah, well, I quickly moved to all grain. As anybody who's obviously probably really quite committed to making a better product, as you will from my experience of being a chef. You don't just stand by and expect, you don't take shit ingredients and make something of quality. You buy the best, you cook it correctly and serve it quickly has always been the mantra of restaurant. And probably that actually parlays beautifully into the brewing industry as well. You buy the best ingredients, you brew it correctly, and you sell it quickly, because that's what customers want. They want fresh, brewery fresh. So yeah, I mean, so from a homebrew perspective, you look at your beer, and then probably the last one you drink is like, fuck, it finally tasted fantastic, and then you start all over again. And you keep going. Yeah, so a couple of rounds of some decent judging results in Nelson, and I said, you know what, fuck, I think I might be really interested in trying to turn this into a career. And I'm sure half of you guys have already heard this story, but at that point, I reached out to a handful of breweries around the Nelson Marlborough region, sent emails, tried to call people, got absolutely no reply. And the first person that actually did respond to my email like 2 weeks later was Soren from 8Wired. And he goes, well, I don't have a fucking job for you, mate, but if you want to come over and hang out, he goes, by all means, come over. So I drove over the hill from Nelson to Blenheim and hung out with him for a day. And I was like, oh shit, man, I absolutely adore this.
So this is at Renaissance, wasn't it?
Yeah, this is when sorry, just a little bit. Sorry. So for the folks that you don't know, Soren started his career at Renaissance in exactly the same fashion, ironically, how I approached it. Which was he reached out to a bunch of breweries, and the guys at Andy and Brian said, hey, yeah, we need some help. Why don't you come over and start working for us? So he quickly became their assistant brewer. He's quite passionate about making great beer, obviously, as they continue to do today. And he said, yeah, he's like, he was starting his own brand there as a contract brand as 8Wired. And so he said, hey, if you want to come over and hang out, by all means. So I came out, and for 7 months, I drove over the hill for 3 to 4 days a week to just basically just be there, just to shadow him, basically clean up after him, prep his tanks, mash in with him, just watch the process and start to understand how a brewery operated. And after 7 months, finally, Brian looked at me one day and he goes, you want a job? And I was like, I want a fucking job. I'm here for fucking 7 months. Of course I want a job. Like how much more time and effort do I have to put in order for you guys to hire me? So he's like, well, you live in Nelson. I think it's going to be weird. I go, I'll move to Blenheim. I was like, well, without a doubt. So yeah, my partner and I packed up our stuff out of Nelson and moved to Blenheim. And then, I worked there for a year as their assistant brewer. They hired me right out of the gate as their assistant brewer because I'd made a heap of their beers, and I was working with Jim Hawley and Matt Dainty, who are both just absolutely fucking renowned brewers in New Zealand, pretty legendary.
So what beers were you making, or what was your favorite you were making at that stage?
You mean with 8Wired or Renaissance?
With the Renaissance.
That's tough, man. It becomes, it's hard to say like what you be. It becomes process, and it would be really hard for me to just say, oh, well, I really enjoyed making that beer the most. And I don't mean that in I mean that in the most positive way. It's like, as a production brewer, it's the starting in the morning, it's coming in, it's making sure it's all of the little details in order to be able to make beer. And it's irrelevant almost what beer it is you're making. It's the process. It's the being there. It's the smells. It's the sounds. It's the start to finish as you do. Like if you guys are home brewers, obviously, and when you start to set up, you boil the water. I mean, all of that is the most important part. And still to this day, when I get invigorated when I get to put myself in the brewery, because obviously our business has grown quite a bit. So I'm not actually in the brew house every day. I'm also in packaging, doing massive amounts of admin. So all of those little steps along the way, it's refreshing to be able to be there at the brew house. So yeah, I've enjoyed making all the beers. Some of them were fucking nightmares to make. You got stuck mash. I don't know if you guys have ever been to Renaissance. It's fucking old school brewing, man. It was milling into bags, 25 kilo bags, and dragging them upstairs and throwing them over the top of this kettle and mashing them in with a canoe paddle. And that is a massive amount of your sweat is pouring into the beer, which is probably slightly affecting the pH. Who knows? But that was what brewing was. Very fundamental, very old school, which is pretty neat. We
recently had Kelly Ryan on, and he said since he's left the malt house, and so he's not lugging anywhere near as much grain as he used to, and consequently he's gained a bit of weight. So the beer belly starts to come out a little bit more when you spend a little bit more time in the chair in front of the computer. It's all part of it. Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I mean, we were all thin as rails, and you could carry 25 kilo bags up steps. It was pretty easy. But yeah, no, I mean, I just really enjoyed working there. It was and probably, in my opinion, at this point, it would probably make one of the best lambic breweries in New Zealand if they were ever to
to completely switch over. Yeah. It's the space at Renaissance is just perfect for that. I'm not sure.
You're making a stone cutter.
Yeah, I made Stonecutter, and obviously all the core range. The porter was fantastic, and then obviously we made all the 8-wired beers. And my responsibility when I was there was to make all the core range keg beers, because he started to use steam shortly after we moved there to do all the bottle products, and then all the barrel program that built 8-wired's barrel program is all started there as well. So I did a year at Renaissance, basically smashing out everybody's beers. And then at the end of that year, Soren was like, "Hey man, I'd really like you to work for me." So essentially the next day I went back into the same brewery, just getting my paycheck from a different person, which made it a little awkward for a while, for all of us. But at the end of it, we're all friends and we're just trying to make good beer. And I
What was
just,
the
my
deal?
responsibility
Didn't
shifted.
Renaissance go bankrupt, or was there some type of a takeover there or something, or a financial new owner? Or
Yeah, well, there's now, I guess. My understanding is, what is the name of that company? It's Brand.
Constellation
Maybe
Brands.
one of you guys know what it is. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, those guys just, yeah, they had a rough go. This is long after I'd left. I'm not sure really exactly the details, nor is it any of my business really to share in any of that stuff. But Brian and Andy, I apparently just ran into some rough times. Somebody else came in, basically bought their brand, has also bought, as we all would know from the news, the Funk Estate brand as well. So they're making both of those beers they're both those brands out of Renaissance at this stage. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure. I stay in touch with those guys very little at this point, but I always wish them the best. But unfortunately, they've kind of sold off their product to someone else. And obviously, 8-Wired moved up here in end of 2014. That was when I left Blenheim to move up with Warkworth as well, which got me to 8-Wired up here, set up the new brewery. Yeah,
So
we're there.
was that when? What year was it? Hotwired won the it got it was a beer of the year or something award. I think might have been around that time. I remember buying the bottle at in Owakuni. It was $14 for the bottle, and I thought, oh, I've got to give it a go. And
it's now cheap.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah. I mean, that was one of the things that drew me to 8-Wired originally, was that Hopwired. That was one of the ones I got in Nelson at Fresh Choice, and fucking blew me away. It tasted like beers that I had from home. I really enjoyed it, and I was like, oh shit, this guy's making fantastic beers that are really hop forward. Be really interesting to see what he's up to. Yeah, who knew?
You're drinking a dark beer there. What do you got? Might be on the same. Oh, the milk stout.
Yeah, barrel-aged milk stout.
Oh,
Well, I figured it was worth a celebration hanging out with all you guys. Fuck, I gotta do something good. We'll pull something out of the archives, if you will.
I'm on a Japanese dark lager. I'm feeling a little bit lackluster.
Oh, cool. No, hey, there's nothing lackluster. That was a really fun beer to make. It was a first stab at trying to make Asahi Dark, and it's probably a bit too flavorful, and from my opinion, probably just a hint undercarbed. But outside of that, I think it was a worthy stab. I'll let you guys be the ultimate decision on that. But yeah.
Oh, I wondered.
I think it's a very cool beer. I think no one really knew which box to put it in, though. That was the funny thing, is you just sort of see people drink it and the cogs wearing, and no one really knew what, it was like. Yeah, it was very cool.
Nice. Oh, thanks, David. Yeah, cheers. What is guys? This would be a great opportunity. So what's everyone else drinking?
Correct. Cyclone Swell.
Oh yeah, yeah. What do you guys? Cyclone Swell. That's a new one. What do you guys think of that?
Yeah, I had that on the weekend as well.
So what?
I think it's great. It's nice. It's juicy. Yes, it's good. I'd always throw another pig in the bitterness kit, but that's me. No, it's banging.
Oh, cool.
There's, I forget, up here at Toby's in Titirangi, they have one on tap, one of your McLeod. I think it's just the Pilsner, actually, or I can't remember what it is. So I've had quite a bit of that, but drinking your Scotch ale tonight.
Oh,
Wow,
yeah.
yeah, traders, man. Oh, yeah, cool, man. That is
Look at basket.
Had this one
that.
first.
Oh, yeah, nice. Oh, yeah, cool. Some bit of Sail Rock.
Yeah. Traders is always a guilty pleasure. I love this beer.
What
Yeah,
is
that's
that one,
one of those
David?
ones, man. It's our slowest moving beer, to be honest. It takes. I don't, and I really I like that beer. I mean, it's malty, it's complex, it's got all those little bits and pieces, but it's not a pale ale, so people just don't want to drink a lot of it.
What is it?
Everyone you give
David?
it to loves it. But sorry,
What
It's
is
always
it?
done really well for us in awards, and
Traders Scotch
everyone-
Ale.
the people
Oh,
that
okay.
really like it. Yeah, it's one of those things.
Yeah, everyone loves it, but no one buys it. Go figure.
Yeah.
They actually had it on keg at a cafe I went to a couple of months ago for an art opening. And I was like, sweet. So much better than the Heineken I thought I was going to have.
Yeah.
It's
Did it make you buy any art?
Scotch ale all night.
And I saved myself a Belgian strong for later, but because that beer is just insanely good, man. That beer just blew me away. And but yeah, it'll make me slur.
Isn't that your favorite beer,
Yeah,
Jason? the
it'll
quadruple?
absolutely do that to you. Yeah, no, that one, the Belgian Strong was obviously our house, the house Belgian strain that I like to use with a Duvel malt bill. And that was it, man. Just massive amounts of dextrose, keep it super lean, super light, and see what the yeast can do together. But didn't want to make Duvel because obviously there's only one. So it was really just a matter of just trying to have a bit of play. And yeah, I was surprised. It's conditioned really well. We have bottle conditioned that as well. And I was pretty psyched to get a nice award for that.
What's your opinion on? I mean, a lot of those recipes for those Belgian beers call for like these candy sugars and stuff like that. And so what was that?
No, that's right. No, it was a bit of like, for some reason, Siri started to record everything and play it back to me.
So a lot of these recipes call for that candied sugar. And you just said use dextrose. What's your opinion on dextrose, sugar, candy sugar, and those things, especially around the Belgian beers?
Yeah, Belgians. Well, it would all be flavor and then obviously brewer preference. For a classic Duvel style, I mean, I don't know if you guys have done some history on that. They use massive amounts of dextrose. And obviously the reason why is because dextrose is a single glucose molecule. So it is easily absorbed through the cell wall, doesn't create a lot of off flavors, versus if you got sucrose, which is 2, you got to break it. So you get a little bit more complex fermentation profile that comes out of that, sometimes some negative characteristics from a sugar. But then you got the invert sugar, which would be candy sugar, but oftentimes you get a little bit more flavor from that. And I think the idea, if the history on Duvel, for example, was they wanted to make it like a German Pilsner with Belgian character and rank up the alcohol, because that's what the Belgians like, because they love booze. Good on them.
Yeah.
So it was just really a matter of kind of following down the roots a little bit. And I mean, if you guys have obviously followed our styles, my tendency is to try to emulate some classic parameters with maybe a slight variation, kind of learning the rules and breaking them ever so slightly. And that's definitely probably a easy.
So what would you twist with the Belgian strong then? Because that's a pretty, it's pretty true. Well, it's very true to style. I thought it was, I mean, you said you sort of didn't want to make a Duvel, but it's pretty damn close.
Yeah, well, yeah. But my house strain is much different than the Duvel strain. So, I mean, honestly, probably from a malt bill perspective, I mean, it would have been 100% Dingemans. So it would have been a Belgian malts grain, which is what I like to do with all of our Belgians. Try to keep the base grain as authentic as possible. I usually don't use New Zealand malts because they get a bit too grainy, unfortunately. And then I can't remember off the top of my head, but I would say there would be 150 to 200 kg of dextrose probably in that beer, just to keep it really nice and super clean and really, really lean. And just real subtle. And we would try to control the fermentation temperature to be able to kind of control a little bit of the fusel alcohols, because Dextrose has a tendency to be a bit like crack cocaine to yeast. They'll just fucking suck it in real fast. And if you don't control that temperature right off the bat, you'll get those big fusel notes that come out.
Right.
And our house strain has a tendency, our house Belgian has a tendency to really give off a bit of Belgian like pear and spice. So it's obviously a little bit different than the Duvel, but
so what sort of ferment temp are you using there?
I would start about 19, and then we probably bump up to about 22 is where we finished.
So it's not that high as far as some of the Belgians go.
No, man. I'm not a big fan of getting up too high. I've never found anything good coming from it. The yeast is happy to ferment up to 36 degrees, but they don't really want to work up to that temperature. All they do is produce shit at that point, from my experience. So to kind of keeping them slightly tamped down has always seemed to be good. And I used one of our fermenters that had a higher headspace, because what I found is our Belgian strain kicks off a massive cake on the top, a massive kreuzen. And if it pushes too hard up against the top of the fermenters, it usually ends up on the floor, and we lose a lot of the yeast that would normally flocculate back down into the beer to clean up the byproducts at the end.
Right.
So it seemed to produce a really nice beer. I was pretty happy with it. Yeah.
Hey Jason, right here. So the question about you can mate. So when I first got into McLeod's, it was the Trader Scotch Ale, and then always been a big fan of the 802 and Quadruple. So all pretty high percentage, high flavor beers. And then just
especially that quad, man. Fuck, I love that quad.
Yeah. And then just recently I had the Howls.
Oh yeah,
Like
the most recent one, that we did.
I was initially thinking, it's going to be pretty light. Most other breweries, I don't really get into it much, but being McLeod's, I had to give it a go, and it was pretty amazing. So yeah, give me a bit of a background on that. That'd be great.
Oh yeah, cheers. So on the Hellas or the Scotch Ale?
The Hellas.
Oh yeah, the Hellas. So the Hellas, we used our house lager strain, and it's 100% Weyermann Pilsner, and a hint of Vienna. I actually think I might even have put a bag of Munich in there. That's it, man. And ferment it at 10 degrees until it's done. Slight rise at the end for a de-rest. And we'd used Saphir and Sot hops. So pretty classic European varietals. Yeah. Super simple, man. Just condition the shit out of it for a couple of weeks after. Nice and cold, man. And
so no real twist on the style then?
No. Why fuck with fucking perfection, man? Do you know what I mean? Like I can't imagine this is just my mantra. Like these guys have been fucking making these beers for 200 years plus, and they're beautiful. And what do? They ferment them cold, and they keep it simple. Like, and again, it comes back to my chef roots. It's KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. It's just don't do anything to it and do it well, and it'll be delicious. I mean, that beer, when it came out, the brew crew, we're all just sitting around, we're laughing, we're like, fuck, this is delicious. And we had a sesh on a Friday before we just basically can't, like, it was in tank. We hadn't even canned it yet. And I brought in a whole bunch of freaking 1 liter Steins, and we just sat out around the brewery and tried to drink as much of that tank as we could before we packaged it. And we had a fucking blast. It was such a great night. Everyone was like, this is what Oktoberfest, this is our own little Oktoberfest. It was
how were your Lederhausen the next morning?
We didn't mark the tank, but we did it. We did a good job on it. And considering the hangovers that we all had, it was a solid effort. It was great.
You probably don't add any coriander or anything to your Belgian range? Don't any spices? No coriander or anything?
Well, today actually we just brewed our Sunset Wet, which is an annual release. And we're lucky enough in Paparoa. I know David saw the video that we put up today, but there's a farmer that grows Seville oranges. I don't know if you guys have ever had a Seville orange. They're
It's a local grower.
Yeah, local growth. So they're fresh. So I got 160 kilos of Seville oranges. And
So
the
he's not
best,
dealing with dried peel. Oh, wicked!
oh, fuck, no. This is the absolutely fresh. It smelled fucking incredible. But
Awesome.
with the best practical joke that we have with anyone is if anyone ever had actually eaten a Seville orange?
No.
Yeah. Okay.
I've had
If
the
anyone
dried peel and
offers you
stuff
a
like that.
Seville
They're-
orange, I'm going to give you guys the inside tip. They're fucking terrible. You never want to actually eat a Seville orange. They're one of the most bitter, sour substances you can put into your face. But the zest is incredible. It is absolutely full of spice and classic orange, but it's also bitter. I put it in a gin and tonic, and by the time you get to the bottom of the gin and tonic, it's quite bitter, which is exactly why they use that Seville orange in that style originally. Because nobody fucking wanted it, and they were just like, what do we do with this fruit? And the Belgian farmer's like, I'll take it off your hands for $2. You know what I mean? And I'm going to make a beer. It's going to be great. I don't need hops. Fuck hops. So they threw it in because it has bitterness and aromatic properties. It's brilliant. So basically we took 160 kilos and it took us about a week to zest them all. So we didn't get carpal tunnel. And then we just bagged them up and threw them into the whirlpool today with some classic, just lightly warmed up coriander seed, put it through the coffee grinder, put those in a muslin bag, all chucked it in. It was just, the aromatics were just off the fucking charts. I'm really quite excited to see, because we've always put those in a smaller quantity. We've always used fresh orange. I've used powder in the past, and it's never really quite resulted in the same character. But
Did you
this
put it
one-
10 minutes into the boil, or what were you
No,
adding?
no, it's all whirlpool. So I've got a 3-pot system. So we bag it all up, throw it in, whirlpool it in. Takes about 20 minutes to fill the whirlpool. They steep for 20, and then we ran off with it, which takes about 35 minutes to get it into tank. So it would have been in there for just about an hour.
So our
all up.
contact time. Yeah. And so what does the local guy grow them for then?
What's that?
What was the local guy growing those oranges
He had
for?
no idea. So he showed up in this like beautiful Audi fucking A8 or something. I was like, whatever, man. I was like, and he shows up and he's like, yeah, we planted all these trees. And I go, and he's like, I got these Seville oranges. And I kind of laughed and I was like, there's only basically one thing you can do with these things, that you can sell them to brewers to put into Belgian wets. And he was like, oh, well, old ladies like to put them into preserves. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, this is probably not a great retirement investment, but hey, what the hell, man? Well, I was like, I'll absolutely have a go. And I think I bought 40 kilos from the first year. And then this year I bought 160 kilos just to try to bump it up. And, but I think there's a few other brewers around New Zealand that have caught wind of it and have bought quite a bit, because it was a little difficult for me to actually get the quantity that I needed this year.
Oh.
How many litres of beer was that in, Jason?
This will yield probably almost about 2,000 liters. Yeah.
Cool.
Hey, the quickest way to Seville from here, from Auckland?
What's that?
Tunnel. The quickest way to get to Seville from Auckland is it's tunnel right through the center of the earth.
I've been to Seville.
Is it really? No
Yeah,
shit. Is it almost 180 degrees?
Yeah, it's the kind of Antipodes point is between Seville and Malaga.
Quite certain that I could fly quicker than you could tunnel.
Maybe not at the moment.
Really hot in the center, but on the other
My
side.
own jet. My own jet.
Shortest distance, I should say.
That's brilliant. Oh, nice one. That's an awesome fact. I like that.
All right. Well,
Quick
Jason.
question, guys. How is the new brew house going, mate?
Oh, before we get there, we'll finish the journey, David. Tui, we'll bring you back to you arrived from Blenheim and you arrived in Auckland at 8 Wired.
Yeah. Yep. So built the barrel program down there. Sorry, we're here, never there. So we just Soren wanted to open up his own brewery, rented at least a space up where he's still at right at this point, and then we moved up there. Got the brew house started. Probably a year later, an opportunity popped up here at McLeod's. You guys want to fucking hear the fucking story? Whatever, everybody knows it. And yeah, man, had a bit of a sabbatical, and then an opportunity popped up for me to be able to run my own brewery, and that's where we are today. Yeah, that was shit almost 6 years ago. Yeah, it'll be 6 years ago in April. Yeah. Yeah. Here we are.
We're glad you decided to make the move.
Oh yeah, cheers, man. Oh, thanks. Yeah, me too. It was never going to work out there ultimately, just from a psychological standpoint. And I've always wanted to run my own brewery, and that has always been part of my plan at some stage. And yeah, these guys were happy enough to be able to take me on board, and we've really worked incredibly hard to keep building this little brand out of a shit fucking brew kit, underfunded fucking shit show, and every day is a learning experience. We DIY it on a daily basis. We troubleshoot and just try to figure out how to keep making good beer. And to this day right now, man, I've got some of the fucking most amazing people that I work with. Absolutely love the crew that we've built over the last couple of years.
How big's your team now?
Well, I've got 2 guys that are on my packaging brew team with me, and I've got 2.5 others. Essentially, I've got a part-timer that are full-time for basically dispatch and logistics. But everybody jumps in. I've cross-trained all my crew, so everybody knows how to fill kegs, clean tanks, work in the brew house, pack orders, drive trucks. It's so
didn't you get your own trucks because you wanted to make sure the beer was cold to destination and that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it was one of our first purchases, aside from obviously being incredibly committed to cold storage of our products. From the minute it comes out of the fermenter and it's packaged, it goes right into a refrigerator, and we do our utmost to get it cold to you guys. We don't work with customers that don't refrigerate our beer. Yeah, and we put it in trucks. So yeah, we have two trucks at this point that deliver into Auckland colds. Well, not at the moment, obviously, but normally we do all of our deliveries around the basically Auckland North. And then we just bought another one to be able to do larger haul back and forth between our cold storage, because we need larger cold storage for building inventory offsite. So we've got a bigger truck that can move multiple pallets back and forth on a daily basis. We started off, I used to do, my bottling run was 18 cases. And now we're, on canning days of 330 mils, we'll be doing upwards of 600 cases. So it's a big jump from in the last 6 years for sure. Yeah.
Jason, can I ask about the name McLeod's? Did you start up the brewery and the name?
No, so the history is Jeff and Clayton Gwynn are my partners, and they have owned the Pizza Barn for the last almost 17 years now. Mm-hmm. And Norman McLeod was the
Reverend Norman McLeod.
Yes.
From Nova.
Yeah, man. Storm and Norman, as we like to refer to him. He's put he's kind of my fucking nemesis, if you will, around the brewery. So anything goes bad, I always fucking blame it on him because he was a teetotaler. But anyway, that's a whole side thing. So the property that we're on, where the Pizza Barn was originally his homestead. So it's basically an homage to the McLeod family. Because if you look at the list of migrants that moved from Scotland to Nova Scotia, around the Cape to Australia, and then ultimately ended up with land that was given to them by Governor Gray back in the day in Waipu, about 200 plus on that boat, on the original boats, were McLeod's. And he ran the Presbyterian church that was part of that. So these guys, when they set up the brewery originally, they kind of dedicated the name to that site and to him. So that's where that comes from. None of us are McLeod's. I'm probably the most Scottish person that that works for the brewery at the moment, because Bathgate is a little town in Scotland, and my ancestors are actually Scottish, and they did the same trek, except they went from Nova Scotia and then they went to Massachusetts and stayed in the U.S.
It's a great story. Well, sadly deceased friend of mine was a Campbell, and his ancestors came out on the boat with Storm and Norman.
Wow!
And
No way.
You know where I haven't been up to Waipu for years, but the cemetery there, you used to walk through the cemetery down to the river, and they had a little house there, a little batch. I think it's well gone. But yeah, so I used to hear a few stories about Storm and Norman staying in a house right beside the cemetery. It was all a bit sort of scary and eerie, but really interesting stuff.
Yeah. Well, and his sons were actually bootleggers, which actually makes it all a beautiful ending.
Full circle.
I don't know if you guys knew that, but the bootleggers. Yeah.
Oh, thanks for that.
Sorry, we just froze. I don't know what happened.
Oh, we're all good.
No, Jason's frozen. There, Jason?
Must be Reverend Norman.
Yeah.
Reverend
He heard
Norman.
us. He heard us talking.
Struck again. Yeah.
It's that Waipu internet.
You've cursed us with a teetotaler.
We abused him on your behalf.
I'm telling you, this is like, it's ironic because it happens at the brewery all the time. Sorry, guys. I'm not sure what happened. It just stopped.
No, brilliant.
So
No, it was definitely Norman.
It was. I'm telling you, it's Norman. Here, I'm gonna turn a light on here so my face doesn't look black here.
Are you out in rural Waipu, are you, Jason?
He is now.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm rural. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I'm. Well, it's downtown Waipu, so we would be. I don't know if any. I'm not. I know a lot of you guys have come up to Waipu before, but we're it's pretty rural up here. Yeah, for sure. I live about 5 minutes down the road from the brewery, but if you look behind me, obviously it's just pretty much trees. I only have a couple.
Nice.
Yeah, it's quite nice. Aside from the neighbor has band practice on a daily basis, but outside of that, everything's.
Are they good?
No.
So has the barn been running as normal recently? I knew Whangarei's sort of gone through waves of level 3s and 4s and all the rest of it. So has that been open as normal and that business resuming, or is it where you at?
No, I mean, I'm not. I don't have anything to do with the pizza barn aside from supplying beer to them. They're from a business perspective, for me, they're just a customer of mine, even though my partners obviously own both.
Right. Okay.
Just for clarifications.
Yeah.
But the pizza barn is operating from Wednesday to Saturday at this point. They've been running very limited hours, just basically dinner service. They haven't been doing any lunches. As you guys know, man, it's just COVID's fucking weird times, man. It's been doing a number on every hospitality business around the country. It's been pretty tough.
Mm. But the packaging, having the canning lines and that kind of stuff, you must have been thankful having for that all set up.
That is the only thing that is keeping us all afloat, man. And like you guys going online and ordering our beer that's what keeps us going, man. And so in grocery store, I mean, we've been big enough over the last few years in order to be able to start to poke into the grocery store market, which just would have saved us. I mean, if we didn't have them, probably at this point, who knows if we'd be pretty dire, to be honest.
Yeah, New World, you seem to be quite well represented.
Yeah, well, New World was one of the ones out of the gate that was receptive to us, and they still are at this point, because we are the only brewery in New Zealand that doesn't DC. I don't know if you guys know what DC is, but it's their distribution center, and every brewery that supplies as a listed product on their shelves, it goes to ambient storage. We're the only brewery that is allowed to not go to DC. So we actually deal with all of our stores on an individual basis and ship on an as-need basis for our product.
You must have been very persistent, Jason.
Well, man, if you guys know me, I don't really fuck around about it as far as that stuff goes. And I've been beating that drum pretty hard, and we just said no. And thankfully, they were receptive, and our customers were asking for it, and they bent and they said, we don't do this for anybody, but for you guys. It's not easy, don't get me wrong, because most of the store managers, they just want product to just be there, and they just want to put it on a shelf. So really, it's really quite difficult for us. We have to work with every single store manager to be able to make sure that they order from us directly, because they have to go back to the desk and they have to get on the computer and they have to order the products, and then they can ultimately get it there. And DC, they just walk around and they just go, oh, yeah, sweet, we need this product, and it just shows up the next day. So for us, it's a little cumbersome, but ultimately, in my opinion, as consumers, when you guys go to the shelf, you're going to get a better product. And
the other thing that I know that you're big on, which is oxygen in packaged beer.
Yeah, man.
So if you could talk to the group about packaging and, well, I guess from ferment onwards, regarding oxygen, that would be appreciated.
Well, sure, guys. Yeah, I mean, oxygen from the point of ingress, when you put it in order to be able to help stimulate yeast growth, at that point, oxygen is our enemy, and they are fucking mortal enemy number one, right up until you open up that bottle or can for you on the other end. I mean, we have a dissolved oxygen meter, cost me fucking $20,000. And that is our most valuable piece of equipment, and we use it on everything. We test head spaces on beer. We test beer as it's going through hoses. We test hoses before beer goes through it. We check cans as they're coming off the canning line. We check bottles as they're coming off the bottling line. We check beer on the way in, the way out, constantly. And it's fucking hard, man. And there are times where you're freaking the fuck out because the numbers are higher than we're normal to. And we will stop everything. And sometimes it will take hours to work back through process to find out that it's a freaking leaky seal coming off the side of the tank, but you don't see, there's no liquid coming out of it, but oxygen finds its way in. And there's a really great little image that we measure oxygen in parts per billion, and parts per billion is one drop in 200 liter barrels of liquid. That's the measurement. So we are chasing, in our cans, our tolerant is 50 parts per billion, maximum into a can. And unfortunately, canning is not as forgiving as bottling. Bottling, we would see our typical TPOs, which is total packaged oxygen, of between 9 and 12 parts per billion. Because a bottle is brilliant. You can inject CO2 into it under pressure, and you can vacuum it out twice, and it's a perfect little chamber. And then you can put your beer in and you smash a cap on it. Life's great. But unfortunately, caps suck, and they literally suck. They literally suck in oxygen over time. So as brilliant as that might be, in 6 months' time, it's actually worse off than what a can will be in the same time frame. So our tolerance on a canning, because it comes out, it's essentially a gravity fill. You purge, you blow some CO2 through it as it comes through, lid goes on, comes around, you measure 37 parts per billion into a can of, say, a 440 mil, will actually taste better in 6 months' time than the same beer that would have been in a bottle at a lower ppb. It's one of those things.
So Jason, transfer hoses and stuff, are you purging them with CO2?
Absolutely.
Keep it down?
We actually chase liquid. So what we do is we hot water sterilize everything, and then we blow through CO2 and push the water out. And then we measure the gas that's on the other side of that, that's coming through. and it has to be within a tolerance, which is typically below 10 ppb. At that point, we will start to push liquid beer through it at that point. And then we measure the beer because there's always going to be trace amounts of water, and water is fucking about 4,000 to 5,000 parts per billion of oxygen in water. And so that is obviously boiled water is significantly less, but it's never zero. Yeah.
So what can we do in a home? A lot of us are kegging, and in some way that process actually goes backwards from bottling, because when you were bottling, you got because of the re-ferment, you got the oxygen scrubbing going on, so it's sort of harder to keg. So what can we do on a home brew scale going into a keg?
Purge the shit out of your keg. The best thing would be a positive pressure. So if you're using CO2 at home, you have to have a pressure gauge. So if I were a home brewer, first thing I would do is invert my keg, and I would blow CO2 upside down into it and back out the bottom. Just much like we do with cleaning kegs in a brewery. You flip the keg upside down. The spear is at the very top, because gas, CO2 is much heavier than oxygen. Oxygen always will rise to the top. CO2 always drops to the bottom because it's got the extra CO2 molecule, and it blows. So you're going to push up and you're going to push down.
So sorry, I'm missing something. So why are you inverting?
Well, because in order to clean, if you've looked in the inside of a keg, you have a spear, or you guys not have spear inside of your keg?
The cornies, yeah, the dip tubes rather than
okay.
spears.
So corny. Okay, it's rather irrelevant. So you go on the other side. So basically, what I would do is I would pressurize the keg to say 5 psi, and drop that pressure down as much as you can until there's very little amount of gas coming back out. So you feel it. You pressurize it to say 10 psi. And then you release that pressure very slowly until you can just feel a little bit of pressure coming out. Do that twice. And then leave a small amount of positive pressure on it, and then start to put your beer into it. At that point, you're probably pretty well purged of oxygen. Without a meter, you have no idea, because you could be picking it up from other sources. But from a homebrew perspective, that would probably be a good place to start.
And dry your kegs before you fill, and don't use bloody foam in them. Like everyone, fills with star sand and shit like that, and it's just a mating ground for oxygen.
Absolutely. And if anyone has access to a brewery and you use peracetic acid on finished product is fucking the worst thing you can ever do. It is the only time we ever use peracetic acid or peroxy.
Star sand equivalent, is it?
It's totally different.
Star sand is not an oxidizer, but peracetic acid is. It's HO3 with acid involved as well.
They're totally different products, Reese.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So, but that is it's quite normal in a brewing environment, and that's what a lot of people use. But at the end of it, it would just ruin your beer instantly, unfortunately. We had an incident where we had a mobile canner come into our brewery, and unbeknownst to me, were spraying peracetic acid on their gloves as they were grabbing empty cans. And I know, you fucking laugh, but I was like, literally somebody sent me a picture of 2 cans of beer that were opened at the same time. One was brown and one was perfect. And I was like, what the fuck? I was like, oh shit, man, we're getting massive amounts of DO. And I'm like, that's pretty aggressive. And then going back to the process and having a conversation with him, that he explained what he was doing. And I was like, the only thing you can use on the end is hot water. Star sand is really good, or ethanol, like 80% ethanol. And that's what we use on all of our fittings is 80% ethanol. That's the perfect on the spot sanitizer. So if I were you guys, if you could buy ethanol in bulk, you can dilute it down to 80% and just spray everything with that. That's the perfect thing to sanitize with. It's instant to kill anything from bacteria or foreign yeast. But yeah, once you're purged, and then you can fill your beer up. And most of you homebrewers would probably drink your beer rather quickly, so you shouldn't have to worry about it too much.
What's your thoughts on sodium percarbonate, that no rinse sanitizer?
My opinion on no rinse sanitizers is, as long as it is pre-fermentation, it's great. It's fine. the no rinse sanitizers for finished beer on the other side, I'm always quite apprehensive. And if I have the means, and if you guys do as well, heat is your friend. If you can boil it, you can fucking set it on fire, you can spray alcohol on it, and you can light it. You know what I mean? Like, metal is your friend as far as that goes. Especially if you're going to be doing mixed fermentation stuff. Anytime you can apply heat, and there are great little things you can go online, but the hotter you can get it, the shorter the amount of time is. So you're looking at what, 71 degrees, you're going to need about 35 to 45 minutes worth of contact time for everything that's in contact with your beer, right up to like 90 degrees where you only need 15 minutes or less. And that's what we do. All of our lines just recirculate through a hot water tank until they're smoking hot, essentially, and that kills everything. And
so you're still using heat as your primary sanitizing method?
Absolutely. Yeah. Pre-fermentation, obviously, we clean our tanks with we always start with caustic. We hot water rinse, we do an acid rinse, and then we rinse with hot water again, and then we'll do a peracetic acid prior to putting fresh wort into a fermenter where we pitch yeast. And then at that point, everything from that to packaging is always heat treated at that point through the same process. We have it's a very regimented cleaning process.
What's the temperature you're normally running the liquor that you're using to sanitize? What temperature are you running?
90 C. And you can't sanitize. You can pasteurize at 64, but it would take you a fucking hour and a half. So 71 is the bare minimum that you would ever want to use to be able to start to try to sanitize anything. And it's right up to 90 to 100 to boiling. But obviously, boiling constantly, you get massive evaporation rates, you get flavor profile changes in the water. So we try to keep it around 88 to 90 degrees. Yeah.
You just when you're talking about purging the corny keg, I mean, do we not the best way? Not we don't need to turn those upside down, do you? Because of the dip tube.
Well, we do a dip tube because we clean because we have a keg cleaner. So we flip the thing upside down. It's got a spear in it, and then we can blow, and it pushes gas up and pushes big gas pressure by pressure down. If you guys are using just corny kegs where you can open the lid, it'll be the same thing. You just you can push it up. You can push through the bottom. You purge out through the other side. I always recommend you can sit there and you can pour CO2 through it into perpetuity, but what it does is cause turbulence. You know what I mean? And we've learned this through processes. Like if we put CO2 on the bottom of a tank and slowly bleed it off at the top create a positive pressure, which you're putting a small amount of CO2 on the bottom and a little less coming out of the bleed valve. All you're doing is mixing that oxygen that's in there with CO2 into perpetuity. It'll fucking take you forever to get the dissolved oxygen levels down. However, if you positive pressurize the tank and you fill it up and you go, sweet, I'm at 10 PSI, let all of that gas out until there's almost nothing coming out. You don't want to vacuum, because once you go to vacuum, now you're sucking atmosphere back in.
Oh, so you're pushing.
You're kind of like a diffusion principle, really, actual dilution.
Exactly. Yeah. So you positive pressure until you got just a bit of CO2 coming out, stop it, pressurize it again, and let all that gas out. And do that a couple of times. I mean, if you're super anal about your IPAs, I would recommend doing that 4 or 5 times. If you've got, because CO2 is probably not that expensive. Maybe it's a bit more for you guys, but I mean, if you really want the best tasting IPA, that's where you really want in particular. All the other beers where you don't have hops in it, it's not as important. It really is not.
There was a trick with corny kegs that Ian Ramsey showed me where you actually turn the valve halfway through, and then you can keep on adding CO2, and then you actually put your nose over it until you can't breathe, and then you actually, because there's a switching point where you're getting pure CO2, and then your brain does a funny thing, and you actually know that thing is actually full of CO2.
Well, at that point, you probably lost a massive amount of brain cells at the same time. So, hey, man, you never know, man.
Explains a few things.
Yeah. I would not recommend that, because breathing CO2 is obviously poison, and it's bad for the brain. It's bad for you to ingest. Obviously, as we all know, the atmosphere that we all live in right now is increasing with CO2.
And-
It's lowering the
and-
amount of ambient oxygen that we have. We're 11% oxygen in the atmosphere now, and that's slowly going to start declining, and that's not a good thing for any one of us. So breathing CO2, I don't recommend that. I do not recommend sticking your nose over it. I've heard people try to, like, if you can put a candle in front of it or a lighter. I personally cannot advocate for that at all. I would recommend nice big open atmosphere to blow your CO2 out so you're flushed. I've opened up tanks, and the first thing you want to do is stick your head in the inside of the tank to see if it's clean, and you almost fucking pass out. And we can watch CO2 roll out of tanks from behind light as you open it up. CO2 is dangerous, and it's great for beer, but it's bad for people. Yeah.
Is it best if you purge
Yes,
your
sir.
keg
You're following.
slowly?
I'm sorry, there's a couple of people talking one at a time, please. Yeah. What do you got?
I was saying, is it best if you purge your keg slowly as opposed to gushing the CO2 out?
In my experience, if you're doing what I just mentioned, if you're positive pressure and you're releasing the vast majority of it, it's rather irrelevant. If you are trying to, this is like if you have a massive tank, and this really doesn't apply on a homebrew scale, I would probably say positive pressure release, positive pressure release, positive pressure release. I think you're at pressure, the amount of volume is irrelevant because you're going to let most of the gas out anyway. But on a big brewery scale, they don't have that luxury. For us, we can fill tanks with water, and we push all of that hot water back into our hot liquor tank. So we know that we purged our tanks completely. That is the best way to make sure that it's completely evacuated. Because when you push gas behind liquid, it doesn't get any better. But if you don't have that luxury at home, the next best thing is to pressurize, drop, pressurize, drop, pressurize, drop. Big
What
tanks,
Jason's talking about there is
slow trickle over a long period of time.
we did some tests a couple of years ago with the proper DO meter, similar to what Jace uses, and it was really interesting. I mean, like what he's talking about there in terms of method, where you fill it with hot water, was the best method in cornies by far, because you don't want to fill them with a cap with the port off. That should be closed. Otherwise, everything he's talking about, why bother? But the biggest thing is that it's the liquid. The worst scenario was the ones that were filled with star sand, because it's all just ridiculously oxygenated water. And what we were saying before, was it 4,000 or 5,000 ppb is what typical water has, and if it comes out of the tap, it's really aerated, so it's even more. But you boil water and you drive out all the oxygen. So either dry your kegs, don't do foam, or fill them with hot water and push it out. And you actually don't use that much CO2 doing that, and it's clear.
It's less. You're absolutely right, David.
But that's something that homebrewers can do easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, for us, like on our bright beer tanks, which is where all of our end water is, exactly what we were just saying, David. We fill these 2,000 liter tanks full of hot water, and that's also a sanitation step for us. And then at that point, if you go really fast, you will actually end up with a higher ppb on the other end of it. So we run them off. It takes us about 40 minutes to empty a 2,000 liter tank with CO2 from head pressure, and we evacuate the entire tank, and that out comes. And we typically, even after that, there's still oxygen present, and it'll be between 12 and 20 parts per billion for us on a commercial scale. And at that point, we will still drop the head pressure down, just as I explained, quite low, and then gas it up again. At that point, we're down to about 2 to 3 parts per billion.
So how much of a bottle of CO2 do you use to displace 1,200 liters?
We will use, so we use G bottles, which is what, 200 and, what do they call them, 214 Gs. So there'll be 35 kilos of compressed CO2. And we'll use on an 8,000 liter tank, it will evacuate most of that tank. So in a small tank, it'll be 20% of that. So if you have a 5 kilo or 10 kilo, again, this is all math based on whatever size tanks you guys have.
They're normally 3 to 5s.
Yeah, 3 to 5 liters.
Two.
For the,
3 to 5 kilos.
yeah, 3 to 5 kilos for your CO2 bottle.
Mm.
But I don't know what size fermenters you guys are working in.
Oh, usually 20.
Yeah, okay, 20 is pretty standard. Oh, negligible. I mean, you guys are looking at like 500 grams of probably CO2 to be able to push it out. And then that, and like you said, David, which is a great point, is probably a bit slower in that would be a beneficial to you because you're going to use a little less CO2. It's not going to be as aggressive. And you're going to push out more of the residual water that's going to be inside of your tank if you have that ability. Yeah.
So one of the things you're saying, and Dave was saying during the week, is about drying the kegs. What's everyone's methods for doing that? Is it only using CO2 to push moisture out?
Hang them up on the washing line, mate.
I don't think Jason, it's been a while since he's used cornies. All I'm going to say is one of the biggest things I see is that real common method that people use for filling their kegs. So is they fill up with star sand, right? They fill it up with foam, and then they run a tube to the bottom through the main port and let it fill up. And it's just like, yeah, how the fuck you bear. At least you can do is turn it upside down because yeast and wild things and all the rest of it don't run upwards. Turn it upside down, leave it for a couple of hours just to dry. And you've probably dropped the amount of, DO going into your beer by 90% just by doing that alone.
Absolutely. Especially, I mean, anytime, if you have a spear, you should always invert it. If you don't have a spear, then obviously you're going to have to go the other way. Yeah.
Well, that's
because if you have a spear and you can push upside down, you're pushing the gas back down through, and then it's going to come out of the same port that you're pushing the gas in because you'll have the 2000. Yeah.
You guys probably don't understand when you're using like Sankey kegs, like so Jason, little commercial kegs. They're designed to be clean and inverted.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
From
a brewer perspective, I have a Sankey keg, which is what you normally see in a bar, and the spear goes up to the middle. You guys are using the 19-liter kegs where you don't have a spear and it's just the top. It's gonna be much different.
Yeah, but we've got a short gas post and a long beer serving post.
Yep.
But then, so potentially
use the serving post. Absolutely. I mean, I would absolutely, if that's what you're using, absolutely invert it. Yeah, because again, you're pushing gas. You want the heaviest gas to drop. You want light gas at the top to be able to push down. So you're using the CO2 to basically push all the gas outward. And if you start at the very top and you push downward, you're going to be your best result.
Yeah, so that would be using the short post, the gas, the grey line in then, I think.
A long post. You want to have the keg upside down.
I haven't used one of those in a long time. Sorry, but yeah. So your serving line would be because obviously you're drawing beer from the bottom of your tank. That would be the best one to start purging from. So you'd be doing backwards. Yeah. Right? Am I right?
Yeah, you're.
Okay.
So, I'm just trying to translate for you, mate.
No. Thank you very much. No, because I completely forgot. I always talk about on a commercial scale, and I keep forgetting. Sorry, guys.
I'm a bit slow here. Are you saying push CO2 into the dip tube down?
Yes.
And have the keg stand
down.
Be backwards. Yeah.
The keg upside down. Then.
Keg upside down.
Keg upside down.
In through
gas in the liquid tube.
In through the out. So yeah.
And the keg upside down.
Yes.
Yep.
It's the double inversion, Robert.
So what's
in through the out, upside down.
And the same valve that you would be drawing the beer from is where you would actually be wanting to push the CO2 in to purge it out. And you would purge it out through what you would normally put your CO2 in from to serve.
But if you put in the normal CO gas in and you just purge it out of the release valve on the top, does that not?
No, you want to do that. You want to do opposite of that.
Yeah.
You want to go in through the serving valve and out through the release valve.
Yeah. You can do whatever you want, but at the end of the day, if you want to be producing beers that McLeod style, I think what you're saying is great.
No, it's it. I mean, I'm just saying from the conversation that we're having right now, from a thorough purge scenario, if you want to have from experience, that would be your best result is to push in through the serving valve and out through the purge valve. So it's opposite of what you, and this is exactly the same way that we do it at the brewery. Yeah.
And then the keg right side up or upside down?
I would do it upside down because then what you're doing is you're pushing the gas up hard up against the ceiling and you're pushing all the liquid down through your outlet. So you're at that point you're going to have the best purge possible.
Okay.
Because otherwise all you're doing is it's just constantly mixes. You know, the laws of gas, gas. If you ever watch gas, they completely mix really quite readily. Even though everyone says you get that nice layer of gas on top, that's pretty much bullshit. Gas is like feathers, you know. I mean, they just fluff together really, really quickly.
Or
The speed of oxygen is 13 meters per second. I mean, for fuck's sake, yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, maybe there's some scientists in the group.
No, but it's just what you're saying is totally true. It's this great myth that it's like the 5-second rule when you drop shit on the floor. Because bacteria always sort of sits there and goes, "No, I'm going to hold off for 5 seconds, man."
yeah, no, everything's fine. Yeah, exactly.
You're just going back to
it's awesome advice.
The filling of the corny keg.
Yeah.
So you do what you've been saying. You're doing that after the dryer, the 2-hour drying that David's saying, right?
Well, from the purge. Well, it depends. Are you doing if you're just doing a CO2 purge, or if you're going to do a liquid purge? I was going to do a liquid purge, which is fill it up with hot water, which also sanitizes your corny keg. And then when you flip it upside down, if you have the means to be able to hold it upside down, is push your CO2 through your inlet, your serving valve. That will immediately create a really nice CO2 bubble on the very top of your corny keg, and use the outlet, which is normally what you would be pushing CO2 in, becomes your outlet. And then you push that out. And I can't stress enough, it's hot water. If you're using hot water, it's going to come out under pressure and it's going to be very hot, and it is potential to burn yourself. And you be careful, have a tube, run to the ground. When you start working with pressures in hot liquids, there is an enormous amount of caution that needs to be made. And every time I say to everyone that works in our brewery is you need an exit. So if you're going to put pressure into something, where is the pressure going to come out of? And know that before you start.
How about if you guys are interested, we can talk about it at club night or something, go into a bit more detail, because what Jason's saying is awesome. But we're going around in circles, and we could be making far better use of this man's time because he's got gold to share.
That's good.
As well as good beer.
I think I'll just go with the drink it quick solution.
What?
Just drink it fast solution. I think I'll run with that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Jason, on your malts, so you mostly use Belgian malts for Belgian beers, German malts for German beers, and I guess Malt Europe as a base for like Kiwi beers, American beers, or something. Is that like your general thing?
Absolutely. On all of our house beers, my base malts of choice outside of specialties is Malt Europe. We use Pilsner and Malt Europe Ale. Yeah, I do not use Gladfield as a base malt.
Yeah. Have you got like any personal favorite malts that you just like for what that malt does?
Just through experience, I found that UK malts for IPAs and pale ales are fucking fantastic. And for a while I was actually able to get really good malts direct in container loads, but due to current shipping constraints, the prices started to go to exponentially, and then the malt was going to sit way too long in warm containers on boats, and we've opted against that.
But I was call that remalting.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. Yeah, it starts out as pale malt, and when it gets here, it's Carafa 3. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's good. We use a variety. I've used Golden Promise. I use Pearl malts, different types of Bairds. I'm not a huge fan of Bairds. I've used crisps. You name it. I've pretty much had a go at it. UKs, I think, are really great for pails, but unfortunately, even you guys have probably noticed they're really expensive. Even on a commercial scale for us, you're looking at 70 to 80 cents more per kilo, which for you, when you're trying to run a profitable business, is a massive, massive part of your bottom line. And if it's a negligible result on the other end, sometimes you have to use that as a decision making. But I found that Malt Europe produces a really incredibly consistent product for us. I mean, if you guys like our beers, that's part of the reason why they taste the way they do. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, a lot of pro brewers recommend Malt Europe for their base malts. I think it's
Yeah.
In your long border, what have you got any other little specialty malts in there as well as the Malt Europe?
The which one? I'm sorry.
The long border.
Long border is malt Europe Pilsner. That is all it is.
Just that's it.
And we use sour grapes from Gladfield.
Okay.
Well, you said sour grapes I just use to adjust pH, but it not only does it adjust pH and mash, but it also gives you some fermentability, so it increases yield on the other end as well at the same time. So
Right.
they're pretty much a win-win. Yep. Yep. But that's it. That's the only malt that goes into that.
So do you find that that Malt Europe malt seems to be varying size? You don't have any issues with the mill or anything with that?
Not at all. No. It's incredibly consistent. We buy bulk bag direct from them, and actually we're looking at even getting in a couple of silos at the brewery. I'll be honest with you, Malt Europe has been the most consistent grain that I've worked with in New Zealand. Absolutely. Yeah.
And so it's just the Pilsner and the Pils malt you have. There's no
Pilsner and their ale malt. And we use Vienna. We use their Vienna, and they also make Munich. Those are the other two malts that they make. And both of those go into a variety of our beers. So there's the only two Viennas and Munichs that we use. We use a little bit of Vienna in our Paradise Pale Ale.
So you touched on
I'm drinking at the moment, and it's delicious.
So what was that?
I'm just having a Paradise at the moment. It's always great.
Oh, nice. Oh, thanks, Ryan. Cheers, mate.
So you mentioned your house yeasts. We had the guys from Throth Technologies on a couple of weeks back. You tried some of their yeast?
I have. I don't use their yeast.
But so your house strains is just something you propagate internally there.
Yes. I have a yeast bank that we've worked out the strains that we like, and I get those directly. And I'm never going to tell you guys. Sorry.
But you
do your own propagation.
You propagate yourself as opposed to.
We get the bank that we use. We can get quasi large pitches. I love the Froth guys, and I went with them early on. I was like, hey, do you guys think we can work with this? And, I bought their vape yeast, and I tried it in a couple of beers. I used their buddy yeast in a couple. I even used their, the unicorn, which I thought was great. And actually used that last year in a couple of our Belgians, the Belgian wit they did last year. That was fantastic. I went to buy that again this year, and they don't sell it anymore. But they've gone with their vape and buddy yeasts are consistent. A lot of other people using. I didn't find that the results that we were getting were as consistent, and the flavor profiles were what we wanted. So I've gone back to the cultures that I've been able to get from our yeast bank. Yep. And so we get a quantity. We usually get 2 liters at a time, and then we'll propagate that in our 200 liter tank, and then that's sufficient in order to be able to pitch into one of our 2,000 liter ferments. And then our bigger tanks, obviously, you have to get a whole larger quantity to be able to ferment 4,000 and 8,000 liters.
And then you're doing 5 or 6 generations from that, or?
Each yeast strain is very different. Our house lager strain is good for 10 to 12 generations. Our house ale strain, I find at around 6 generations, starts to lose the ester character, starts to drop, and then also its attenuation starts to drop as well. So at that point, from a continuity standpoint, we need to be able to get a fresh strain in. Our Belgian strains, I usually only do 2 or 3 just because they're seasonality beers, and we just can't. There's just not a demand to continuing on with those. And then the couple other strains that we use, they're just they're rather seasonal. They're pretty sporadic. Yeah.
I steer things in a slightly different direction, because one thing I think you've been doing, I've been really, really amazed with over the last 2 years, is some of your work with Brett. And I know there's quite a few guys that are sort of in the group that are into a little bit more of the non-traditional fermentation and stuff like that. But some of your Brett beers are absolutely cracking, man. The kind of flavor expressions you're getting from a beer that's sort of pretty young to release is, it's like, wow. anything you want to share? Because I know you'd have a pretty willing audience on this one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the barrel program itself is, I've kind of stalled a little bit in the last probably year, just because we've had my barrels, because our property is not very big. Any of you have been up to the site, we don't have a lot of room. We've just built a shed next door, which is actually going to house the new barrel program. I've had some down the road, and to get a forklift in there to get barrels down is incredibly cumbersome. So we've just kind of gotten to a point where I just haven't been able to work with it as much. But I do have these 4 tanks, 1,000-liter tanks outside that I can do some a little bit faster turnarounds, and I can do some mixed blends, but they won't necessarily, some of them won't have always had oak character. You know, the Hoppy Saison that we just put out, that was just a pure ferment in there. The Soulberry Sour that we just did, the Vijoa Peach, a lot of those were just beers that I had that I could put in there and then add fruit to from a mixed ferment. Oh man, I've had freaking heaps of plays with different types of lacto, different types of Brett, some mixed culture strains. I found a brilliant yeast bank in San Diego that just does fucking amazing mixed culture. And I've tried to do some spontaneous up where we are, and maybe there are other breweries that have had good luck, but when you're in a subtropical environment, I've not found a really nice, clean, lemony sourness. You know, like when I was in Blenheim, we were able to do some spontaneous, and they were fucking gorgeous. When you get those really cold winter nights, you can get just lovely character. The coldest it gets up here, I've tried to do some stuff, but you always get these kind of underlying, and no offense to anybody else, some little bit of Cantillon type character, which I really don't care for. A little bit of that kind of fecal.
Like a little bit of dank basement, you know.
Yeah, and I'm more of a Boone or Champagne type cleanliness. You know, I mean, I really like it clean and straightforward and delineated. And I just was really unhappy with the spontaneous stuff. So I've been always just doing quite legitimate, if you will, propagation and additions of Brettanomyces and Saison strains, or lacto, different types of lacto, PDO, to be able to end up with what we've ended up with. Yeah.
You're doing some Brett fermented beers that, like, you know, you're doing big pitches of Brett that were turning around reasonably quick. I mean, like Soulberry, I mean, that wasn't a secondary fermentation from something, but that was from scratch, wasn't it? Or was that using a base that you then dosed with fruit and then?
Well, a little bit unbeknownst to you, that was the first base beer that I'd put through our new brew house. So all I wanted to do was run some wort through the brew house. I actually even forgot to put brewing salts into it, and I put this beer into tank, and I had a culture that I had. It was a mixed ferment, a bit of Saison and Brettanomyces strain. I can't even recall, obviously, off the top of my head of what it was. A very fruit forward. It wasn't a Brucenalensis. It wasn't a Lambicus. I'm not sure which one it was. And I pitched that in, fed it out beautifully. I was like, fuck, this tastes really good. A really lovely mouthfeel, because we have a slightly higher chloride to our water profile up here without the sulfites, which usually dries it all out. And I was like, wow, it's really big. And I was like, oh, fuck, this tastes fantastic. And it was at that time that I also realized that I forgot to pipe in my sparge arm. So I had to pour water over the top of the mash tun and get it repiped in, because, you know, these things happen as you're busy. And then I was able to so the Soulberry is Manga Teperi. There's a farm up there that grows that exclusively, which is kind of a hybrid raspberry, if you will, because I think a few of you guys have tried it. And when I got my hands on that fruit, I was like, holy fuck, this is incredible. So I pitched, 60 kilos into that 1,000-liter tank, and just let it just condition for a month or so. And it was just banging. And I was like, oh shit, there's nothing more I need to do to this. We just need to get it packaged and see how it goes.
The Black Watch must be another one you're proud of. Do you want to talk to us about that?
Which one? The first or the second edition? There's two.
I've only said the most recent one.
Okay.
Yeah. If there's another one, talk to us about that as well.
All right. Well, I'll
Ooh.
start with number one because I broke my mash tun, and it took almost 24 hours to run it off. It was I did a party guile method. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but that is when you mash, you take the runnings from the first mash, you boil that, and then you remash with that initial runnings into a second mash of all new grain. So you have double the strength of the mash, and then you run that off. And unfortunately, it was pretty early days at McLeod's, and we had a hot water tank when the mash tun was above it, and it was very tiny, and the screens were shit. It was this cheap Chinese fucking crap, and we overloaded the thing, and it literally broke the screens, and it was taking forever to run off. And we'd been there for about 10 hours, and I'm sitting there with Milton, who was one of my guys that we first started there, and suddenly I hear these bagpipes off in the distance, and I'm like, I said, what the fuck's going on out there? Because we're focused on this mash, got to get this mash run off. And I was like, what the bags? He was like, oh, it's International Tartan Day, mate. And I was like, oh, well, this is gonna be Blackwatch then. I was like, perfect, this is great. So we ran it off and we tasted it, and the pH had continued to drop because the mash took so long. So it was almost a little bit on the sour side, but it was tasting fantastic. And I said, well, fuck it, we're gonna carry on with this. Fermented it, put it in the tank, put some oak staves in it. There you go. That was Blackwatch number one. And the last the 2020 version of Blackwatch, I don't know, it was just a massive imperial stout, hint of smoked malt in there and some beechwood, just pretty traditional ferment. Didn't touch any barrel, didn't do anything else. Yeah, it was just a little bit of a tweak on the original recipe, but not sour. I didn't want to make it the same, and if we do it again, I'll do it completely different. Yeah.
You wouldn't want a 12-hour sparge.
Yeah, no, that's no fun, man. I don't know if you guys have an issue like that where you're just constantly pushing on the bottom screens trying to get some liquid to come out, and it's coming out like syrup. It's pretty hard to sparge syrup, unfortunately. So that's no fun. But hey, you know, the beer that came out on the other end, it was really quite proud of.
It was cracking.
Well, that's it. You know, it's one of those things like at the time you're laughing and you're pounding yourself in the head, and I'm sure you guys will have these homebrew moments. And you're like, but you know, your gut is just telling you this is good. You just need to follow this process through to see what happens on the other side of it. And it's a wonderful learning experience. And if it comes out to be a wonderful beer, it also has a fucking cool story behind it, you know. Yeah.
Do you have any favorite children? I mean, you're probably your own harshest critic in many ways, but I mean, like, there's got to be some stuff that you've done where you've just tasted and gone, oh, fuck me, I'm just giving myself a pat on the back for that one.
The Belgian quad.
Yeah.
That was the one, man. I've had a few, you know, I mean, it's one of those things. I'm a pretty humble guy, man. I am my worst absolute critic. Every beer that I taste, I was like, fuck, you know, this is not right. It's what we should do. Is it consistent with what we're doing? I'm my worst enemy. Yeah, for sure. But that Belgian quad, man, every time I tried it, it always surprises me how good it tasted. And I was like, fuck. And when I found out, when I was about to submit it to the AIBA last year, I said, hey guys, grab me a case of that because we're going to send it off, pull it out of library stock. And they came back, they're like, dude, there's none in the library stock. And I was like, what? There's supposed to be 11 cases there. I've allocated it. It came out of inventory. Computer says it's there. They're like, no, man, it's fucking sold. And I was like, oh. And I looked around. I didn't have any at home. It doesn't exist as far as the brewery. I started calling my customers. I said, I need a few bottles of this bag now that I know that it's all gone, just so that we can have some to like look back on in the years. We've got none. So if anybody has some, bless you, enjoy it. It's all there is in the world.
I think I got one or two left. I keep the vertical. I want to sit down and do your double. I've got two of your triples and the quad. And I'll do them as a set one. In fact, I'll bring it up. We'll sit down.
Yeah, sweet. Oh, it'd be great. No, I know. Well, actually, the Oyster Goza. That was another one. I still have a 30-liter keg of the original. That's the only one that's left aside from a handful of cases.
Can't
And,
drink that. I don't got a shellfish fucking allergy. I'm gutted.
Oh, that's funny. Oh man, oh, that's a boner. Well, so we've got.
You put crayfish in the next one. Keep them out of it.
Yeah. That's sorry. There's no way. Yeah, but I'm working with Tom down at Matakana Oysters, and we're just trying to wait till the border opens up because we're gonna make it again this year. We've already set aside. We've got the yeast ready to go for it. It's just a matter of once the borders open up, you can get up here and give me some oysters, and then we're gonna make that one again. I was astounded. I thought the beer was lovely. I thought it was a really nice example of a classic Goza, and how fast it sold out just blew me away. I couldn't believe that many people.
So do you add salt, or is the oysters
Oh,
enough to add the salt additions?
Yeah, I mean, it's the liqueur from the oyster. So, I mean, I hate to say it, but it's basically oyster shit. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's like that, and it goes up with seawater. Obviously, they filter seawater all day long. That's all they do. So it's basically the filtered seawater within the shell, as well as the oyster that contributes the salt to that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's pretty true to style for an oyster Goza, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, there'll be a new category
What's
for
the
it.
Germans shit themselves on that one? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what the fuck? How dare you?
Jason, are there any beers you want to make but haven't because you don't think they'll be commercial enough, or they're going to take too much tank time or whatever, or too much ingredient costs?
I'll be honest with you, John. When I first started at McLeod's, I had a list of about 80 beers that I wanted to make. I made them all. So at this point, I'm kind of at this really interesting stage in a career where I'm not. Don't get me wrong, I'm not void of ideas, but I've kind of hit a lot of the categories. But it becomes almost strategic, because you also see there's a bit of a hive mind out there of brewers, and the minute a brewer thinks of another beer in a commercial sense, go, oh fuck, I want to do that. Suddenly somebody just put it out into the marketplace. And you're like, fuck. I mean, even our Belgian Strong, I felt bad because I'd made that beer. It was conditioning in bottle, and Soren released his, and I was like, fuck. You know what I mean? I don't want to be that guy that seems like you're copying the other brewery. Do you know what I mean? Like, you always want to be very unique. You know what I mean? We always want to stand apart as an individual or as an individual brewery, but it's like Plato and Socrates, the last two fucking original ideas on the planet. We're all just doing the same thing. Garage Projects made every fucking beer that you could ever think of.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it almost ruins it for everyone else in a playful way. But yeah, you just have to kind of find your way. And for us, we're trying to do the same thing, and we're trying to make a profitable business and appease our core range of customers, but still try to keep it a little bit fresh. And probably the biggest area of play for me is the Smuggler's Bay, which is the barrel program. And that is just ultimately for me is taking the barrels that I've set aside and blending them together. And the blending piece is awesome. You know, I mean, you get 80 barrels and every one of them is different. And every batch that I make is only 6 barrels. So you can come from that and you can narrow it down and you go, okay, these are the 6 that we're going to put into this. Do they need fruit? Do they not need fruit? Do they need a secondary fermentation? Do we need to add them into another wood environment? What is it that they need? And that for me is just the most fun at this point.
So that plays more on your chef palate, I would have thought, than brewing experience.
Maybe. I don't know. I've always loved beer. One of the last chef jobs that I got in Vermont, they asked me to do a tasting menu for them as a trial. And I paired it all with beer, and it fucking blew them away because they were like, what the fuck are you doing with beer? Like, you're a chef, you should be pairing with wine. I was like, nah. I knew one of the guys was Belgian, who was he was the food service director of the hotel. And I said, nah, I'm going to pair this with a Chimay. And I had a couple others that I chucked in there. And he was like, oh, fuck, I love you. Because you know what I mean? Hey, it's like a little background. So you can have a bit of fun with it. But I've always thought beer pairs better with food. Always, even as a chef, I thought the beer dinners were much better. You have such a wider variety of acidity and sweetness and bitterness, and all plays together.
Well, that's one of the good things that they do at March Fest is that beer matched tasting lunch that they do.
Yeah, that's always fun. Yeah, it's heaps of fun. Yeah, you've been to yeah. No, it's great.
Yeah.
I went to a delicatessen. Is that the right word? The 10-course meal.
Yeah.
With McLeod's and Deep Creek. Still waiting for the next one.
I think there's one coming up.
Kingy.
Surely.
Yeah. I just saw that today. Nobody even told me about it.
Okay. What? I was going to say, did you do the pairing? Should we go buy a ticket, or is it a sales?
I have no idea. No, I saw it on, I think it was on Instagram or Facebook.
It was on Facebook, yeah.
Yeah.
Who's running those, Kelly?
I'm not sure who the chef at Kingy is. Sorry.
Okay.
I live in Waipu, man. I'm pretty out of the loop. But
I live in Auckland. I don't know about it.
We're all out of the loop.
Yeah. So
what's a restaurant?
To be honest, we were pretty fucking astounded. They gave us a permanent tap there. So it just blew me away that they were a new and super popular high-end restaurant. And I know they make some fucking fantastic seafood dishes. So it's cool. Yeah, and it's brilliant. Yeah, I mean, I think the first one we would have done would have been at was that one on the top of the Sky Tower? Sugar Club years and years. Yeah. And that was phenomenal. It was a wonderful experience. They did a really nice job with their beers at the time. It was good fun. Yeah.
Jason, are we likely to see another Marzen?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you gotta let a beer run its course. I adored that beer, man. No, thanks for bringing that up, mate. I really liked it. And I know that Behemoth just came out with one, and I tried that the other day. It was fantastic. Slightly under carb, but it was just delicious. Yeah, I loved it. The malt bill he had on there was perfect. It's a nice beer. Again, it's one of those. It's kind of nichey, you know. I mean, you get a handful of folks that really love it, but on the large scale, when you look at a beer, I mean, lagers for me, like pale ales, if we're still sitting on inventory after 30 days, I'm starting to get a little nervous because I want it to be out in the marketplace, I want it to be fresh, I want people to taste it. And a Marzen, you can sit on for 6 months and tastes great. Doesn't matter.
I think the Marzen just got better and better every month. It was getting better. It was
exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's a tasty beer. It is good. It's got a nice malt character. It ages really quite well. Something about lager malt, when you keep it cold, lager yeast rather, it just has a tendency to just kind of keep cleaning it up a bit. But unfortunately, oxygen will always kind of start to tear away at it. So for me, I do find that over time, it just starts to flab out a little bit. The clarity starts to drop a little bit. You start to get a little bit of that chill haze that starts to come through. But it's on the list. I've got some labels. We will definitely probably reintroduce it in another while. I mean, it's one of those things that from the marketplace, if you oversaturate, it just sits there because everyone's like, oh, I've had that. But you need it to go away for a while, and then you guys forget about it, and then I bring it back, and then you want it again.
We got stuck into it at the Oktoberfest at 8 Wired last Labour weekend.
Cool.
Tasting wicked on tap. So yeah.
Oh awesome. Yeah, those kegs hold up fucking great, man. No, it's all about the kegs, man. We were just talking about. There's nothing like high volume, man, with no oxygen. They hold up beautifully.
Speaking of German beers, I haven't had that before, man. That Rausch beer.
Well, thanks, man. Yeah, it was pretty good.
Poured an inch into the nose on it. Was just like, I'm going to drink that now. Holy shit! Man. You picked the scab with me, man. We didn't even get an award for that. The serious.
Yeah, it was pretty. I mean, honestly, even in the results, I was rather disappointed that. From even the judges' notes, I was like, it was easily worth a bronze, in my opinion. Because I've tasted all of our beers before, and we didn't submit any beers that I didn't think would have been medal worthy. But I'm not.
They're really nice rounded integration, like Glickman Schunkerler. I mean, like it's got that sort of where the smoke's kind of threaded. It doesn't sit phenol on the top. It's really beautiful.
No, it's good. I mean, as you know, David, like those beers, like when the smoke drops a little bit, it becomes sweeter and more ham and meaty like. And then as the smoke intensity increases, it becomes drier. And so and as you know, from the BJCP, you get this massive variations on a lighter smoky, little bit more malty, really heavy malty, a bit more on the dry side. But there's a nice variation between. I was really proud of that beer. I quite like it. It was great.
I think
I
at the
had
moment, that kind
no
of meaty, salty umami behind it, it just sits there. It just carries everything. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
cool.
probably the closest one I've had to like a proper Bamberg local. It's just got that. It's got the balance. It's not about the smoke. It's actually got that beautiful base beer behind it. That's cracking.
Yeah,
Also,
cool.
but they're hard polarizing styles because I mean, how many brewers have had, and the guys judging it, I mean, have actually drunken a lot of those kind of niche styles, and they're pretty polarizing and pretty confronting.
I agree.
I hated smoke beers. It took me a while to get to like them, and now I love them.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's it, man. No, and I love the beechwood. I mean, it's very different from like a peat smoke or even manuka smoke, especially like manuka smoke has a tendency to kind of go towards that medicinal side, really intense, really fresh beechwood. It's got a really pronounced character, but it's soft and integrated and meaty like. And then you've got, the peat smoke, which is just fucking hot. It's whiskey, you know what I mean? Like, so you get really delineated types of smoke, and they're all very, very different. Yeah,
What kind of percentage of smoke what were you using something like this? I mean, the balance on it.
60%, about 60%. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd probably do more next time. Yeah, because then lager it longer, because we fermented it just like our normal lagers, 10 degrees, and let it sit for probably about 2.5, 3 weeks. At cooling. So I think we could get away with a little bit more. Yeah.
And that's wow.
Hey, Jason, just hearing on all the effort and the work you do to kind of keep your cold chain and your transportation and measure your dissolved oxygen and all that shit. How do you market that? How do you sell that and promote that as something different compared to all the competition out there? And like how much time do you spend on marketing versus brewing and stuff like that?
Oh, for me, that was something I did really, really. It was like pushing shit uphill for about 4.5 years. Just no joke, man. Everyone just goes, "Why the fuck would you?" Even still this day, I get brewers like, "Why?" We were called DO wankers as well at one point from a bunch of other brewers in the industry, and we were like, "That's a fucking badge of honor. Thanks, man. It's cool." And I mean, the cold chain thing, it's night and day difference. And a lot of people a lot of other breweries are starting to get on to that, and they're trying to market that as well. And I'm, just toot our own horn. Fuck, I will. We're the only ones that are doing it to the level that we are. But I mean, it's so, I mean, come on, guys. I mean, you take an IPA, man, and leave it on the shelf and then put one in the fridge that's fresh. It's night and day difference, man. It's like, I learned that from one of my just most well-respected brewers that I knew from Vermont. And he was like, fucking cold, man. Cold is the only way. It's the only way to retain good hop character and freshness. And when you taste the beer, it speaks for itself.
Easiest example anyone can do. Go and get a Liberty Citra, right? Which is like a really nice, and go and get one from Countdown, and go get one from Liquorland Newmarket. Drink them side by side, and job done.
A great example, because you'll know which one is refrigerating it on the back end and who's not, and that Liquorland Newmarket will.
Look what you guys are doing there. I know it's been a tough ride, but it actually is making ripples. I'll tell you something cool, right? Like this is from secondhand, but someone who at Progs was talking to another brewery about doing the McLeod's approach.
That's cool. McLeod's
that is very, very cool.
Yeah, I mean, and and looking at Jeff in the picture behind you, he and my partners were apprehensive at first, and they were like, "What the fuck, man? What do you believe in this?" And I'm like, "There is no other way. If you guys want to hire me and we want to do this, this is what we have to do." And this has come up in our conversations as owners many, many occasions. Do we scrap this and just carry on to go for the gold and go for money? And I go, why the fuck would we have worked this hard to establish a good reputation for ourselves? And hey, man, I can't say that every single beer that I put into the marketplace is perfect. There's no fucking way. We run on production lines and things miss. We have human error. We do our absolute best. And I stand by everything we put out there. And if anyone has anything that's ever bad, I will replace it instantly without hesitation. And I apologize profusely, but there's only so much you can do. But I know that we can at least do that. We can at least keep it cold. We can do our best to keep oxygen out. We can put it in a cold truck. We can drive it to the store, and we can make sure that our customer respects the hard work that we've put forth to make sure that when a customer comes up and they go, oh yeah, it's McLeod's, man. Oh yeah, sweet. They're pretty good. I'll try that. And then it's going to taste good. I mean, it's not going to be munted because it's been sitting in the back of a warehouse and I've been trying to slog it for 6 months at ambient. Or that because they just want to make an extra buck, they're going to sell pallets of shit to a warehouse, and then they're going to sit there, and the person that's in the warehouse doesn't give a fuck about your beer. They think it's a brick. And there are a lot of people out there in the industry that sell beer that think it's just a brick. It's a box. It sits on a shelf. I need 35% margin on my brick. And I don't want to sell bricks. I want to sell good beer, and I want you guys to have delicious beer. Yeah, man. And it wakes me up in the morning. It gets me to work. It works me till late hours at night. And it, as the joke around the brewery is I beat my staff with a pool noodle when they fuck up. Yeah.
Oh, you're mellow.
It's not abusive. It's soft, and but everyone goes, "Oh fuck yeah, man, fucked up, sorry, bro."
Makes the fucking difference, man. Like and that's what I'm saying. It cracked me up when I heard that, because it was kind of like, yeah, when you're out there sort of on the bleeding edge, it can be pretty challenging. But when you actually start sort of making ripples, that's cool.
Hey man, change happens on the edge. It does not happen in the middle.
Jason, the only good thing about making good beer is everybody wants more and more and more. And how do you put the brakes on?
We have managed ourselves at a 35 to 45% growth, because we've realized that anything greater than that, it affects the operation. It's too much. I want my staff to be happy to work there. I want them to not be putting in 60, 70 hours a week. That's my job. My job and my partner's job should be to work 10 times harder than my staff. So I want my staff to be happy. I want them to be proud of working there, but I want them to go home and have time with their family and friends. And you can't chase the dollar, man, because it's never there. We have been, from a business perspective, we've had to invest heavily to get to just where we are today, to sustain a growth for another 5 years, because there is a demand. And from a business perspective, if there is potential, you want to reach your potential, but you don't want to chase potential and sacrifice quality along the way. And that has always been my thing, is like, as long as we keep making great beer and I can add a tank and we can control what we do, we can manage this. But if we're just going for fucking gold, and then we've tried it a couple times because of our growth. We've had to use a contract facility on occasion in the past to try to help meet demand at certain times a year. And it failed miserably from my perspective. And maybe you guys never saw it, and fucking thank God. But from my perspective, I was like, this is never going to happen again. This is horrible. These guys, they were the best breweries in New Zealand, but they can't make the same thing that we do on the scale that we do. And they admitted it. Like, I don't know what the fuck you guys are doing, but we can't replicate what you do. And we don't want to do it for you anymore because it's not as good as what you want to do. And I go, fuck, good, man, because you're really expensive and you're not doing a very good job either. So we're like, okay, sweet. High five. All right, good. Well, let's get out of here and let's just fucking buy another tank. So yeah, I mean, managing that is hard. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of hours of time I spend organizing and training and teaching my staff to look at small details, because it's all small details. And there is a point where some breweries like Panhead might be a great example of, they went exponential growth, and maybe for argument standpoint, they were terrible. But from an outside perspective, I think they've actually kept their consistency quite well, even right up through that. And I don't know how they did that. For us, I would absolutely, I don't have that skill set to be able to blow up a business like that. I am a piecemeal, one by one, batch by batch. Look, okay, sweet, we're getting there. Okay, sweet, now we can work on another one. Yes, we can do that. My yeast is tired. I'm not making beer. It'll be another 10 days before I've got a new batch of yeast going before we can make this batch of beer again. I'm not going to compromise along the way. Do you know what I mean? If hopefully I'm answering your question correctly, but yeah, it's hard to manage growth, but at the other end, you're just going to shoot yourself in the foot if we go too hard, too fast. And we're a small brewery, and if you guys ever come up to see us, and I know a few of you guys who have, we don't have a lot of room to work. I mean, I'm working in 2 sheds, running hoses between each other. We only have so much room that we can kind of grow into. And at this point, I feel like we've maximized our footprint and we can't really grow much more. So eventually we will just say no. And we have said no. And our mantra about keeping beer cold is probably cut off a massive amount of potential customers, probably to our benefit, to keep us at a steady growth. And we're not making, I mean, I'm not a rich man. I don't get huge chunks of cash every year from the amount of money we're making. Fuck, we're just barely scraping by like everybody else. And with COVID now, I mean, it's touch and go, man. We're all just trying to pay our bills as fast as we can and grow. And I want to make sure that my staff is taken care of.
Is there anything near the site physically that you could put more tanks on or anything?
No. I have literally, when I first started, I go, this is how many tanks we can fit onto the site. And that was 6 years ago, and we are there now. And at this point, we're starting to take up parking spaces, which would start to impact our building consent and resource consent for the property. It's never gonna
Isn't there a park next door?
There was a house next door that we bought already, and that's where our offices are. And we put a large shed there that's going to warehouse the barrels and help to ease our packaging materials. Because I mean, I can't even like share with you guys like what it means to do 600 cases of beer with boxes. It's just boxes and boxes and boxes and pallets of cans, and you have to have a place to put them.
Yeah.
And canning facilities go, here's your cans, get them the hell off of our property. What are you going to do with them? And you have to have a facility to put them in, and put them in a facility cost you money per pallet per day. I mean, it's just like everyone is constantly grabbing a money grab. So to build and grow, you have to have forward vision of going, okay, this is how much square footage I need to be able to warehouse this amount of product for this amount of time to a certain point. It's a
next door, and next door to that's the police station, isn't it?
Oh yeah, well, hey,
you're getting pretty close to the police station.
Yeah, we're pretty much pushed up against. I mean, we pretty much we're as far as we can go on that side. And that in 3 to 5 years, if we are at just absolutely flat out capacity, that would be where we go. Where are we going to move to next? And
they've got quite a bit of markets.
Yeah. Well, honestly, Whangarei is probably ultimately, if we want to keep it in Northland, would be the next location, or Ruakaka. There's a lot of property out there, but again, man, all of that stuff costs millions of dollars, and we don't have millions of dollars. Like, we are not panhandle. We are all DIY guys, man. We are fucking hand and mouth trying to fucking make a business, man, and make great beer. And there's no huge money. Like, all these guys that keep going, oh yeah, I've been making homebrew for a long time, I want to make a business out of it. It is fucking hard. I am a scrupulous, stingy bastard when it comes down to counting labels and yields and trying to get my business to be profitable. It is hard. Buying and prop projections. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And the government, all they want to do is take more from us out of our pocket, increasing excise, adding redemptions, 10-cent redemption on bottles. All of that stuff is going to come out of our pocket, and there's no money in there to pull from. So it is a challenging business, but at the other end of it, fuck, I just want to make good beer, man. But there's a business flip to it as well. So yeah, there's an economics of balance. Like you can go for it and you got no money, and then if you just grow steadily, maybe we can make it. And then we're doing.
Fuck, bro, your passion is always contagious, mate. I mean, seriously. Yeah.
You've talked about hops. Sorry, you talked about malts. You talked about water. You talked about everything but hops.
Yeah, hops. Yeah, man. What do you want to know? Yeah, I mean, obviously we deal when the borders were open, I could go to Yakima and I could do hop selection, which was fucking one of the best experiences ever. We've just set up relationships, and now we work direct with Clayton Brothers Hops, which is kind of an offset of New Zealand hops. They broke away from them. They have their own independent operation. And I can do crop selection with those guys. And New Zealand hops, unfortunately, they're just on a scale. We have to buy 2,600 kilos of one varietal to do a selection. And that's just ludicrous. I'm not at that scale. I mean, that's Epic, Lion, those guys. I'm not there. We're not there. I mean, we'll buy between 500 and a ton of any varietal for us. And that's quite a bit. Nelson Sylvan, we're probably even a bit more, maybe a ton and a half. But these guys, they allow me to go to the field and rub hops in the field and smell them and taste them and go, fuck, I want that. And they go, sweet, what row do you want? You want these 2 rows? That was just last year was fucking mind blowing to me. And
so what are you looking for when you're doing that then?
No onion, no garlic. That's start one. And then ultimately, how do you, and this is hard, man. It's a very new thing for me. This has been one of the most exciting challenges of my career, is taking what normally is just thrown on your plate to going to the field and seeing what it smells like in the field and carrying that through the pelletizing process into your beer, into the glass at the other end of it. And it's incredible. And what you think you smell in the field might not necessarily translate to what you have on the.
So do you take notes at the time then? Well, you've only done it once, but it seems to me something so sensory, you'd need to be able to recall those memories.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not one to stand in the field and start writing notes. I'm a memory guy. It's one of those, like, I know, Reese, you've done some judging, and when a gold medal comes through at the table, everyone looks around and they go, it's fucking gold. You just know it. And it's the same thing with the hops. And in my experience there, and when I was in Yakima, and you see it and you smell it and you're walking through and you just go,
you just know.
That's the one. And when the varietals that I had selected came to us, Brian from Clayton Hops came up to McLeod's and he said, hey man, we opened up the table and he brought the selections that I had narrowed down and we put them together. And like for Longboarder was one of them. We used Pacifica and Motueka, the 2 hops that we use in that. And on their own, the hops were okay. But it was when you put them together, I was like, that's Longboarder. Like there was the light citrusy melon lemon character that came through, was banging. I was like, fuck, that's us. I was like, that's the one. Those 2, bang. Those are the 2 ones that I needed. And again, it was just, and whether I'm right or wrong, I don't know, but it tasted right. It smelled right. And we're going to continue to develop.
But keeping with your simple principle, I mean, the combo of 2 hops, you add a 3rd or you add a 4th, things get muddled, right?
I absolutely agree. Yeah, it's too much. Now, I always find the 3 can work real well if the 2 don't match and you want a 3rd to just balance it all out. That's like food, same thing, man. Like if you can sit there and you can just keep dumping stuff in on the stove, and what do you end up with? Well, yeah, it tastes fine. But like the coolest things ever is just like asparagus sauteed perfectly in the pan with a drizzle of olive oil. You can't beat that. You know what I mean?
You missed the butter.
A steak that you put on the grill with salt and pepper, and it needs nothing else. Do you know what I mean? Like that's, if you keep it simple and do it well, what else do you need? You can cover it with shit because that's just because you fucked up the first step.
Then it becomes noise and not nuance. I mean,
That's it, man. And yeah, that's the cool part. Anyway, it's just from my perspective, it's fascinating. It was an absolute honor and to be able to be allowed to do that. And then I've even been able to walk through the fields with Ron Beatson at his trial hops. And I mean, that's like at the cutting edge, like hundreds of those plants that we saw were never even going to come to the light of day. And I mean, I remember seeing a Sriracha Ace in New Zealand. And he's like, oh yeah, it's just a Sriracha Ace. It was a throwaway hop to him. And the guys from I think it was CBC, and they're like a big kind of hop produce whatever fucking in the States. And there were a couple there and we grabbed it in these giant cones. We peel the thing open and it smelled like pure lemon peel. And we'd all just looked at each other and were like, can you just grow more of this? And he was like, oh yeah, we just had some of that. And he was like, oh yeah, let me show you over here. Completely just blew it off like it was nothing. And we're like, fuck, that was incredible. Unbelievable. And of course, Sriracha Ace, and it smells like dill and lemon depending on what you do with it. Yeah. Anyway, it was good there.
You doing much with experimental hops like the
Yeah, the next 802 is a 09356 from Hopsteiner with a little bit of mosaic. It's banging. Yeah, that's cool, man. That's a fun one. New Zealand Hops just gave us a new varietal. We got 20 kilos. We'll work that into a Cove. All of our Cove unfiltered pale ales are always 2 hops that we just vary constantly. So there will never be the same batch that you guys will see on the shelf. Now, you guys don't know that, but with our new bar coating, hopefully we're going to be able to do a little sneaky coat on the bottom of the cans, probably in the next couple of months. You won't see it for a little bit, but eventually you'll be able to start to tell the difference. So we'll be able to put the 2 hops on the bottom. So you'll be able to go, that one's XYZ, whatever,
Or QR codes rather than
not a QR. No, it'll be inkjet printed on the bottom. So we'll put like CNT for Centennial and, I don't know, whatever.
Oh, give it a problem. QR codes, mate. Something people can scan.
That is you don't live in my world, my friend.
How much effort is it to model cans? I was like,
printing. I'm just telling you, man, printing labels is incredibly costly. And every time you ask them to change something on a label, costs you hundreds of dollars to change the label to do something different, which is why I'm like, I want to change Cove all the time. But if I buy a fuckload of labels at one time, I can get them down to 19 cents. If you change it every time for a small batch, they're like 50 or 60 cents a label. And then if you guys do that in a 12 pack, you see how much money that is in difference for me to pay my staff and buy hops and buy malt. They're huge. And those are the points where I try to find ways where I can still make good beer, but I can save myself a couple of bucks and I can print something on the bottom and everybody wins. That's kind of my goal. Yeah.
You talked before, Jace, about ingredients as being so pivotal. I mean, how much of a difference do you think being able to do hop selection rather than just buying the spot market or whatever you kind of get in terms of blend base has actually made to your beers at the end of the day?
I think, especially after my trip to Yakima, man, that was like, we went from, okay. Well, honestly, when Yakima teamed up with Cryer, that changed the playing field, because New Zealand hops, not to their discredit, they were completely fucking hosing the brewing industry in New Zealand for US hops. The price that they were selling as hops were $60 to $70 a kilo. And when Cryer came in and did a merger and a team up with Yakima Chief, I'm now getting hops at $20 to $30 a kilo. So, I mean, you can see what that does from a profitability standpoint. And then we watched the quality went from, like you said, spot, which is you just grabbing whatever the fuck they want, to, oh shit, I can go over there and I can look at 10 different selections of the same hop varietal, and we can team up with the guys from Australia and we can all look at all of this together and rub and smell and talk and discuss and come up with, yeah, these are the hops that we all want. And that's what Australia and New Zealand ended up with. And I was lucky enough to be the only New Zealander, believe it or not. Funny accent for a New Zealander, eh?
You like to mess with them.
And it was awesome. No, it was good fun. But and then watch the flavor profiles and the access to the new hops is incredible. I think it made the world of, especially for our 802s, man. I think the quality just went right up through the roof. And what we've been able to work some of those hops into some of the other beers, man, I'm over the moon about it. And then a relationship with Clayton Brothers is only going to expand. And we're only going to be able to get better at what we do. I think it's a key ingredient. I mean, malt, unfortunately, we don't have that same kind of play from a selection. I mean, you can, but because of just the mass quantity that they grow and what they do, and that the selections are quite more narrow aside from the specialty end, the hops is where it's at, man. If you're going to make hoppy beers, if you can have an intimate connection with the field to grower, to pellet, to beer, that's the best, man. Fuck. I mean, that's our dream, right? Man, that fucking drives me, man. Yeah. And hopefully you guys get to enjoy the results on the other end.
I think so. I mean, I know it's a massive step. I mean, both in terms of your process improved, but that trip after you went to that trip to the US, that sort of, I did think your beers changed. I think, Yeah,
well, it also just meeting other brewers, tasting beers that from the US. It'd been a long time since I'd been back and tasted West Coast stuff, and just talking with people, and even the Australian guys, just seeing what they were up to. It's cool, man. It was really just a great experience, man. It's good for anybody, man. Just talking to people that are passionate in the industry about their different ideas, whether you like them or not, just seeing and tasting and just being part of it. I mean, it's all collective conscious, for sure. Yeah.
So Jason, when lockdown ends, if I come and spend a whole day up at McLeod's, are you happy to take me around and have a look at your little tanks and stuff?
Yeah, of course, man. No, anytime, man. I mean, it's one of those things, like anytime anybody usually rocks around out back and they pop their head in, and we're not flat out busy, I'm more than happy to set up. And if you can message me somehow directly, and I know when you're coming, it's a little bit easier for me to kind of schedule around. But we're a small team, so we're all, we're usually working pretty hard out there, but I've always got time to talk to fans, and I love to show people what we're up to. For sure. It's good for the crew as well, man, because sometimes it's almost mundane. I don't mean that in a negative way, but it's just like you get into work, you go home every day, and it's nice to see people from outside that have enjoyed our beer to come in and tell the staff how much they enjoy our beer. It's really rewarding for them. I see their faces light up. They're like, yeah, this is why we're doing this. It's like, getting the award that we got at the Brewers Guild. Everyone was here at my house, and these guys they just don't see it. You know what I mean? And unfortunately, it wasn't in a big, huge room with a crowd.
You look like you're having a rave somewhere. I mean,
yeah, there was
literally
literally
this picture behind me, because you guys do the best acceptance for awards around by far.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I mean, it was like I don't know, it's 12 or 14 of us it was in my living room. My laptop, the one I'm on now, was on the floor in front of my television, which we were watching at. So it made it look like it was nuts, but we were just over the moon. We didn't expect it, and it was really exciting. And as I said, I was over the moon to be able to share that with everyone that's part of our team, because everyone works really hard, and you just don't see it, and to get a little recognition every once in a while on a big scale is really cool. No, that's awesome.
Seriously, well deserved.
Oh, cheers. Thanks, David.
Water treatments. That's
Reese, you have a list, don't you?
another little thing. We'll go through all the ingredients of beer. Why not?
What other bullet points do you have on your list?
I mean, every beer is different, man. Our water is very similar to everywhere else in New Zealand. Slightly higher in chloride, really low in calcium sulfite. hint of magnesium, pretty soft. It's all rainwater, mate. So we, depending on the beer, we'll just add a little bit more chloride, a little bit more sulfite, and we adjust pH with lactic acid. Yes, that's pretty standard. Yeah.
But you're big on zinc, aren't you?
We use a hint of zinc to add in Whirlpool on a measured level for yeast health, because zinc is essentially the only nutrient that is lacking in mash in order to help yeast nutrient, to help yeast growth. And it's one of the things that's lacking. It's a heavy metal, so it always sinks quickly. So you can be really careful about when you add it in. So yeah, we use was it a zinc? Sorry, man. Zinc sulfohydrate in a diluted portion into a sterilized water, and then we'll add that in just prior to pitch. There's some ratios, there's calculators and shit you can use online for homebrew, but what you guys would need would be probably about the size smaller than a thimble. I mean, it's minute, the amount that you would need in order to.
But if you're using it like a normal homebrew yeast nutrient thing, it's probably got that in anyway, I would have thought.
Why yeast one does.
Check. Yeah, I mean, why I know why yeast does, and I know what's the other one from White Labs?
Cervomyces.
Cervomyces. Yeah, thank you, David. Just look, if it's not on the list, it's probably a wine nutrient, and it might lack it. So just definitely, if I was a home brewer, I'd double check to make sure it's in there, because that is one of the big ones. Because they'll throw in all kinds of extra shit that the yeast doesn't necessarily need, or that it's got massive amounts of it because you've used an all grain mash. So just keep.
And the only ones that are a problem is where some of the homebrew shops just repackage some fan, nitrogen high, but there's no zinc or anything else in it. The decent ones have got it in it, and it's cheap as chips. I mean,
yeah. Well, as you know, man, a lot of the homebrew stuff was geared towards people using, making mead and all kinds of crazy stuff back in the day, like, or just trying to ferment wine at home. So it was like a homebrew wine industry kind of slowly drifted into the homebrew, and there was a lot of information that's been lacking. But I think in probably the last decade, like the amount of information that we've learned in the brewing industry, I think has really helped increase the quality of homebrew. I mean, shit, I was buying kit from Bunnings and Mitre 10 when I first started. And now there's the brew shop and all these other places. They bring in beautiful stainless pieces of equipment and massive lists of different yeast strains and different types of nutrients that you can add. It's just like the playing field has absolutely changed in the last 10 years. You guys are really lucky. I wish I had the same tools that you guys do now as a home brewer, 12 years ago. Yeah.
Oh, you can't knock the Cooper's kit, mate.
I still have the jug. I would never put anything in it to ferment, but I jokingly want to bring it to festivals and pour water out of it for people. But no, I'll never get rid of it.
Yeah, why not? Why not?
Jason, you mentioned how you've done the 80 different brews roughly. What's your thoughts on Brut IPA?
I think, what was it? I think it was Concept Brewing. I had theirs at Nelson a handful of years ago at the Free House. And I was like, fuck, that's real good, man. And then I've never had a good one since. Sorry. It's one of those, like, it was a knee-jerk reaction to the, I hate even using the fucking term hazy IPA. Thing, you know what I mean? And it's like everything in the world. There's always, wherever there's something, there's the opposite of it. And that's exactly what that was. And I think that was really clever. And I know Urbanana has done one, and I thought that was actually really quite good. I haven't had one of theirs in a long time. They're fucking fantastic brewers. But again, I think it was a bit of a fad. Maybe it's going to do a bit of resurgence. I mean, I just go, man, just make beer like Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. It's fucking gorgeous. It's their water profile's right. Their hop character's fucking brilliant. They got the balance. It's great beer. Make beer.
That's one beer I think every single home brewer needs to try. Sierra Nevada Pale Ale when it's fresh is just.
That's it. Just keep it simple. Don't fuck with it too much. Do something cool. Follow a trend if you want to have fun with trend. I hate following trends. I'm not a big, I just want to make good beer. And if it's interesting and it tastes good, it's great. But I hate that. Like the Brute thing felt like a bandwagon. You know what I mean? It was like the new band. And you're like, oh man, yeah, I just want to fucking do one of those. You know,
Solution in search of a problem.
I didn't want to make, and we had a go at it. I think I did a Brute Hefeweizen just as a piss take, and I thought it tasted all right, but I was like, it's not really my thing. It's too dry, and that's the beauty of beer is that you can be dry if it's on the sour side, but malty and dry is, I don't know. I think some brewers have really done it well. That's probably not something I'm gonna have a go at again, to be honest.
Well,
water profile. Yeah, I think we covered that, right?
well, Jason, you've given us over 2 hours of your time. So if you want to bug out, you're very welcome.
Well, it's cool, man. Well, I'm here for you guys. I mean, if anybody else has any questions, I'm more than happy to answer. But if you guys want to call it a night, that's cool as well. Yeah.
We'll keep on talking. So no problem there.
All right. Well, if you guys do have more questions, I just need to pee. A couple minutes, and I'll be right back. If you guys are cool.
Yeah, that's fair.
I'll do likewise.
Okay, yeah, go sweet. All right, go. It's official pee break. Okay.
I can't